Hey guys, it's me, the guy behind Sanic Weed Speed. Thank you so much for getting the original Sanic Weed Speed video to a million hits. As a thank you, I'm going to explain exactly how I pulled off the creation of the video. Okay, so first off, I have to answer the comments claiming that I simply sped up the video, so let's talk about that. You see, there are actually two ways to play the game at double speed, and we'll be going over the Dolphin method first. Okay, so as of Dolphin version 5 release and the beta build to Dolphin, you may have noticed an option in the settings called CPU Clock Override. This allows us to run games at either faster or slower speeds. However, this causes issues including choppy sound and bugs, such as timing and timers, as those aren't adjusted to pace at the new clock speed, as forewarned on the same screen. So why wasn't the audio choppy in the video? To answer that, let me introduce you to a code that allows us to do the same thing discussed earlier, but on console instead and without the bugs mentioned in emulation. Using the code shown on the screen, we can get the game to run at double the intended speed. This, like in Dolphin, does not readjust the timers to pace at the new speed. So, as a result, the race time counts twice as fast as we observed in the video. Furthermore, using this version of the code, I can change the speed to double or normal speed at any time during the game. This version is what's known as a button activator. Button activators allow the user to enable, switch to, or disable cheats at any time during the game at the press of a button or a combination of buttons, and this includes the double game speed hack. The code shown on the top is the double game speed hack, and on the bottom is the normal game speed version of the code. Now here are the button activator portions of the code. The upper one maps the minus button to the code that follows it, and the bottom one maps the Y button to the code that follows it. Putting all of this together, I set the hack so that when I press the minus button, the entire game speeds up, and when I press the Y button, the game returns to normal speed. This sounds like a lot of work just to speed up game footage. So, why didn't I just opt to speed up the footage in editing? Well, for those who know me from our audio mod, I don't like it when the audio sounds very muddy, and if I sped up the video in editing, that would end up doing just that to the audio when it gets sped up to match the video speed. Alternatively, I could have considered manually editing in the music and all the game's sound effects to avoid the muddy sound quality. The problem with this is that would involve going into the game's files and manually extracting all the sound effects and voices in the game, then scrubbing through the video and matching the sounds to the dumped files, and then placing them there in the video. In the end, this would be more time consuming and a huge pain, so much that I would have otherwise lost all motivation to make the video. With that explained, let's move on to the actual CC part of Sanic Weed Speed. The speed modifier part of the hack is much more straightforward than the double game speed hack. There was once a mod pack called SHWW, which had codes that made the game 300cc and set the amount of laps to 5. So that's what I used for the race speed. Here is the code responsible for the base speed. Alternatively, I could have just run the speed I was aiming for and drive at normal game speed. However, going at those speeds around turns wouldn't let me stay on the track, so to achieve it, I ran the game itself at double speed. This allows me to stay on the course at what looks like a much faster speed, though I do have to react and execute my inputs much sooner than usual, as all the events also run at twice the speed, which is more doable than trying to fight the physics at higher speed classes. Next, we'll go over the hack used on courses where staying on the track is simply not possible at those speeds, even in tasks. So on courses other than Luigi's Circuit, such as Rainbow Road, the physics don't allow the player to stay on the track when they go around a turn, go up a ramp, or through the canyon. They just launch you uncontrollably to the abyss. Additionally, going too fast around a corner will send you into a wall or off course on other tracks, even when played on Luigi's Circuit, which was the only track I could drive on without flying off the main path in the original video. For those tracks, I use a bullet build to drive the course. Now normally, the bullet object can fly off course if it goes too fast around a bend in its programmed path, but that's no issue because I can simply set all the points in its path to be binding, which prevents the bullet from leaving its intended path. Additionally, I program all designated drop-off spots in the bullet's path to be considered unsafe areas, and the game doesn't let the bullet end if it's in an area deemed as unsafe. which is usually spots above pits, over ramps, and turns after the canning. This allows me to run the bullet on a never-ending ride without having to reactivate it, of which briefly steers it off course when it tries to figure out what part of its path it's on. Using this method, I can avoid being sent off the course no matter how fast I set the racing speed to, and probably up to an upper bound, because in a previous testing with race speed, there was a speed value that crashed the game if we drove or flew above it, which was how I did the sanic read speed revisit. Granted, I did forget to run the SHWW hack in that one, which was responsible for the 300cc in 5 laps. So how did the bullet object still fly so fast without the 300cc speed hack? That can be explained with another simple code. You see, there is a code that modifies how fast the bullet is allowed to fly, independent of the race's CC class, and this value is measured in kilometers per hour, but the game reads this speed number as a floating point value. There is a portion of the code that contains the desired speed value, but it's in a float format, so to get that value, I use a decimal to float converter to get the exact value I need for the amount of speed I want. Now Sonic running around on the course is actually just a Sonic on foot mod that replaces Mario on the Mach Bike, which was why I specifically picked that character / cart combo, so that explains why he sounded like Mario every time he got a boost. The bullet object, on the other hand, is another story, and somewhat of a more complicated mod to produce. Using a combination of Brawlbox and C tools, I could port over the model, texture, and animation data to the bullet object. The shadow, on the other hand, is just an empty model shaped like a drop shadow of the bullet, and the game crashed every time I tried to change that model out, so I just left it alone. So that explains the shadow still being shaped like the bullet. I also had to rename some of the sub data for the textures and the animation data to match the ones the game is expecting when it tries to load the bullet when it's used. Otherwise, the game would crash the moment the race loads when the items are prefetched, or use the bullet when the game tries to call the bullet's actions. So now we're finally ready to package the mod together and blast through with sanic speed. Just kidding, there's actually one more step we need to do before the game will perform the outcome we want, and that's to apply the modifications to the game. You see, Nintendo's hardware and software don't allow us to customize the content to our questionable liking, so we need to get around that, and preferably at the speed of sound. As literally the entire Wii install base knows, there are loopholes in the software we can use to load up our own programs, or install a gateway to quickly get back to them, and one of them happens to be a mod installer for Wii games, but I don't need to go through that loophole because I already have the gateway installed. So now all I have to do is place the modifications on an SD card and load the game through Revolution. So now finally we're ready to watch the Sanic go read speed. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching.